Shakespeare Theater in Stratford, Connecticut just burned down last night. It's not really a surprise or a shock to me since the theater has been closed for 30 years. This will actually be the 30th anniversary of when it was shuttered back in 1989. And it was shuttered back in 1989 because for some reason control of the theater was taken over by Stratford and they just never did anything with it. It's actually one of our town's biggest embarrassments is how that theater just sat there doing nothing. It was just a brownfield. Like no one used it for anything. It was just a historical landmark that you could walk your dog around and it looked like the past. And it was kind of nice to think that maybe it would reopen someday. And every now and then they would tease an investment in it and they would show you these pictures and they would say, oh, we're renovating the stage and we're going to put some seats back in for a limited engagement, because they had ripped all the seats out. Never happened, never materialized. And they would just keep saying, there's no money. There's no money. That whenever you ask anyone in town, they would kind of have this weird body snatcherian refrain. If you were like, it's a bummer about the Shakespeare Theater, they would go, but there's no money to open it. And I'm like, do you know that for a fact? Where are you getting that math from that there's quote unquote no money? The conservative human garbage that runs the town, like Laura Hoydick, the mayor. Like these liars and thieves, these Trumpian scam artists. And so she claims there's no money for the arts. That just means that they're selfish, rich, cynical pieces of shit that don't see a return on the arts. They're rich in this town. They have plenty of money, but they want to open a mini mall. I'm not kidding. They want to open a mini mall because they see that bringing in income tax and property tax or whatever, because that's all they care about. They only care about money. They're soulless, crusty, old, cynical, greedy pieces of trash in this town. And they don't support things like a theater. They're isolationist douchebags, and they kind of retreat into their hovels of cynicism, and they allow stuff like the theater to die. And it's also the fault of people like human garbage, like Christopher Walken, Frank Langella, James Earl Jones, Judi Dench, that all performed there back in the 70s and 80s. That's where all of them, almost all of those names I just mentioned, got their start at the Shakespeare Theater. They trod the boards along the footlights. And do you think a single one of those rich pieces of shit ever donated a single penny back to the theater where they got their start? No, never. You think Christopher Walken, the fucking, and has he ever been truly great since The Deer Hunter? Since well before the theater closed? Has he ever made a generous donation as a tax write-off to the theater just to keep it going? No, of course not. He'd rather be doing Balls of Fury, or 9 Lives with Kevin Spacey. Because that's the kind of thing that Christopher Walken would rather support than Shakespeare Theater in New Stratford, right next to Verona Court. And it's a direct recreation of the theater that Shakespeare himself wrote for. It looks just like the theater on the inside from Shakespeare in Love, the movie. Well, it used to look that way. And these pieces of shit like Chris Walken, Frank Langella, they all, before they were rich, they were getting their start on that exact stage. And did any one of them ever show up in the last 30 years to show any concern? Or to throw any money at it to make sure it could stay alive? No. And so the money was always there. It was just being withheld by people that have no respect for their roots. And garbage like Langella that would rather work with kitty diddlers like Jim Carrey on his stupid trash Showtime show that no one watches, by the way. And I just think about how much of this garbage that I've seen Langella in, like Frank and Robot, or whatever the fuck. And I'm like, I bet you he still talks about how he was the last performance at Shakespeare Theater. Yeah, yours was so awful that they had to shutter it forever from the bad reviews.